cemented in there. So the current owner would be subdividing off the portion that we're using and maintaining part of the property. And why did we choose this option as opposed to the original lease arrangement that we were looking at?
So a little bit of the background. This is our third location that we've chosen. The first two locations were determined to be unsuitable because of the presence of seeding black ash. So this site was identified, one, because it fit the criteria of the province in this program because it's reusing former industrial land. The owner of the property wasn't interested in the long-term lease. Their preference was the purchase agreement, and the recommendation of area as it related to the application was that the application be stronger if it's owned land as opposed to leased land. There is on the option agreement is registered against title. And so it does set out the purchase price agreement and the restrictions that we have on it. The subdivision will be done by MODL for the pieces that we need, and the owner is going to be continuing to operate in two of the three buildings that are currently on site. So conceptually, they have the middle of the property, and we have the surrounding parcels, and it's all completely fenced. So that work has been done.
Any other questions for our CAO? Right, so Kathy, you have a question? Councillor
Thank you.
Moore, sorry.
And again, this is to service 700 homes? Am I correct in saying that?
No, so the solar garden would be the approximately equivalent of 1,200 to 1,400 homes if they were put solar panels on the roof. The 700 is the number of subscriptions that MODL would get, assuming that everything moves forward. And that subscription model is at no cost to the residents, and it would result in a reduction of their power bill by 2 cents per kilowatt hour.
So, okay.
So
Thank you.
we sell the power that's generated this back to Nova Scotia Power through a power purchase agreement.
Thank you.
I see no other questions. We'll move on with the budget.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. So I put the finance department in here. It's as the next one. It's the customer portal. So that's the balance to carry over the project to complete the installation. We did discuss this in our operating budget. So this is a portal for taxpayers to be able to have access to their property tax bills and their account transactions online. So we'll also be able to use that for our payroll documentation as well, at pay stubs and T4 internally. So we do have a grant that's been sitting in our reserves for quite a long time to do this kind of work. It was a financial software grant. So that's in reserves to cover the cost, and it will help with the communication and engagement strategic priority of council. Okay. No questions, move on. Yeah, I'll keep going. So we'll move on now to our Director of Engineering, Mr. Stephen Pace, who will discuss the engineering, public works, and wastewater projects in your capital budget.
Hey, good morning.
Just hold a sec. Mr. Pace, go ahead. Councillor Moore?
The administration department, are we going back to this before we finish up here today? Are we going to go back and look at each one of these? We're looking at them now. So if we want to comment on something, we can? Please. Okay. I am going back to the solar garden. In my gut, I know solar gardens are good. I know what the climate change and all that is. But when I look at this amount of money from the taxpayer, no matter you borrow whatever, it's all taxpayers' money. And the amount that people are seeing right now in the increase of their power bills and what they're going to see in the increase of their power bills coming over the next 5 years, I really cannot justify putting this kind of money into something that is going to service 700 homes or service I can't see it when everybody else is paying high power bill prices, and then we're taking this kind of money and putting it in just to help out 700 people. Am I wrong? Yes. Good. Well, tell me what's right then.
So, again, if you could go back 2 slides. So I guess first, we would only spend this money on council's direction to move ahead with the project. So that decision has to be made before we would ever spend this money. So at this point, it's a planned item in the capital budget. This council has not fully turned its mind to whether this would actually proceed to the application. The previous council in July of 30th, 2024 did pass motions in support of the application, the Intermunicipal Service Agreement Corporation, the guarantee, and the subscription model. But this council, although we've been hasn't done that yet. So first, council has to turn its mind to the application. And the merits of the application, I think, are the points that you're bringing up. What we see in the capital budget is money that is from reserve and completely repaid. So we get all of this money back, and we carry no debt if the project goes ahead in the model that we suggested. But we would be eligible to share in the profit generated, and we will be about a 56% partner. The profit,
We're not guaranteed that, though, in writing.
well, the only thing that's guaranteed is the power purchase agreement. But again, that goes to the merit of the application and the program, where the capital budget items are simply how we would get there. It's still open to council to make that decision on whether or not to proceed with the application. The merits of the solar garden, they align with our climate change, the local climate change action plan. It is an identified item, project in that. It does reduce our corporate greenhouse gas emissions. It is equivalent to converting approximately 1,400 homes to solar through rooftop solar, as it relates to greenhouse gas emission reductions. So that is the greenhouse gas reduction emission benefit. But the subscription model isn't something we have any input in. It's part of the provincial program, and that's what they arrived at after a few different changes in scope. But it's a benefit that can be offered to certain residents at no cost to them.
Okay,
And
thank
it
you.
doesn't exist in the absence of a solar garden.
Thank you.
And if I can add something to that, if that's all right, and can correct me if I'm wrong, the solar garden, yes, will assist directly 700 households with monthly savings on their electrical bill. And yes, it's going to help with our greening the grid. However, there is another major benefit, an important benefit that Modo will benefit from the revenue generated by the solar garden. And that is the main reason for the solar garden. The 700 people are the fluff. Yay, we get to help extra 700 people. But the solar garden, the idea that we had started it was to generate extra revenue for our municipality so that our residents, hopefully in the future, we wouldn't have to put up their taxes as much. And that hopefully that money that's generated will be used for the infrastructure. And on top of it, yay, we get to help an extra 700 people. Is that not correct? Could you see
Yes,
if I'm
yeah.
correct with that?
So yes, that is correct. The solar garden, the additional benefit to community members, although it's limited, would be approximately 700 households receiving a 2-cent per kilowatt hour reduction on their power bill.
Go ahead, Councillor.
That's
Moore.
exactly what I said in my first statement was, we're helping 700 people with their power bills, but we've got 25,000 out there that's still going to be not helped, and that's my problem. Thank you. Even though we're supposed to get paid back the money and all that, right now, it's very hard to explain to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Councillor DeLong?
The way I've been discussing this project with my residents has been to say that, yes, it will only directly benefit 700 households, but the fact that the municipality will be less reliant on property taxes benefits everybody. This will be an income generator for us for year over year for 25 years. So that's what benefit I see and what I've been talking to my residents about.
Councillor Brooks?
Would we, as council, have the option, answering Councillor Moore's concern, would we have the option to take some of that revenue once it was generated to offer a rebate on the rest of the constituents' electricity bills? Is that something we'd have the ability to do?
The simplest, that would be a challenging program to manage. We generally deal with tax rates and potential rebates, like the property tax exemption program. So we do have some flexibility, and some of the revenue that's generated could free up additional operating general tax revenue to be used in different places. So there could be some flexibility, as Councillor DeLong indicated. One of the reasons this was examined as a potential alternate revenue stream is we're limited right now to property tax revenue generally, plus grants. So this is one area where we could generate revenue outside of the property stream and then look at investing those funds. Now, to get maximum scoring in the application, you put these funds back into environmental projects, but that's fairly widely defined. But if you free up operating money by using the funds or the revenue generated from the solar garden, you could use the money that's generated for different purposes of council. But I don't know if we could actually get into, because we don't have any information on people's property, like power bills.
So just to follow up on that, could then we even explore a program where some of those funds were put into a trust where other constituents could either apply for solar panels or residential wind or something that would go back into the climate focus, but would spread this benefit around the municipality?
Yep, so the program itself contemplates the reinvestment of the profit into environmental projects, future environmental projects. So if you looked at this funding stream providing additional resources into the PACE program or the WELL program, that would be within the four corners of the program and would be in line with how the program expects municipalities to reinvest profit into environmental programs.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah, sorry, maybe I don't need to speak. I was just going to say, like, reinvesting that money into energy poverty would absolutely address what Councillor Moore is bringing up. And I just want to highlight that if we're going ahead with this project, we need strong communications, because I don't want to criticize past work, but I don't think our communications on this project have been very strong in the past. I struggled to understand it even as someone running for municipal office. So I just want to emphasize, like, when we're taking on a project like this, we've got to have good, plain language communication to the public about what it means, and if we want people to get on board.
Councillor Moore?
Just one more quick snapper. I remember Area being here and presenting to us, struggling with what they said. What did they give us for a guarantee on the revenue generated?
So there is no guarantee on revenue generated because it's generated from the sun. But they did have modeling for Nova Scotia. Also, Solar Bank presented and confirmed that their analysis of solar in Nova Scotia had Lunenburg identified as one of the better areas. So you'll recall Solar Bank presented, and they were a for-profit entity that was looking to do a solar garden in the Lapland area. And they couldn't proceed because the Nova Scotia power infrastructure, the grid, couldn't handle a solar project in that area, which is still an MODL. Not only did Area's information suggest that we're a good spot for solar, but Solar Banks did as well. The guarantee that we get is the power purchase agreement. So in the application, if council tells us to go forward, there would be a number, and that number, if accepted, would become the basis of the 25-year power purchase agreement. And as long as the 25-year power purchase agreement is placed, there's X amount of solar generated, and we would get a guaranteed amount for whatever solar is generated. And I believe the Area has indicated publicly that the expectation is about $250,000 a year in revenue.
Thank you.
Councillor Hubley.
So I'm one of the ones that voted in favor, but I'm now thinking I'm changing my mind. I'm not feeling that this benefits the wider municipality. I said it before, and I'll continue to say it. I'm not against green energy as such. I just think that there's got to be a better deal somewhere that benefits more than my math says 657 households. It's not enough for what we have to put up. We don't carry the debt, but there's absolutely risk. Whenever money is borrowed, there's risk. And if the guarantee is called, it's a possibility. There's risk. Yeah, I don't really have a question. A 2% rebate is laughable, considering how much power has gone up in the last few years. I'm not sure we're doing what's best here. But I'm still open. I'm listening.
Yeah, so just so council's clear, I'm not trying to get council to make a decision on the application, whether or not it goes forward. The capital budget, which represents our planned spend, is there in the event that it does go ahead and that the application is successful and the agreement is successfully negotiated and the project ultimately moves forward. These are the costs that we would incur in this fiscal, and so that's why they're in the budget, with the note that they would all be repaid once the long-term loan is secured by the Intermunicipal Service Corporation. So the debate on whether or not to submit the application is for another time, and that time is coming.
All right, so we're going to move on with Mr. Pace.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Our first project from Engineering Public Works Department is the wastewater treatment vehicle. One of our vehicles, we've got a project cost of $85,000, and it's to replace a 2014 truck. It's lived its life. We had an estimate of over $6,000 to replace, to do body work to meet safety inspection, so it's time to buy a new one. So we're not predetermining the type of vehicle, whether it be gas, hybrid, or EV. But first we'll be evaluating the performance. So we'll develop a spec for that vehicle as all future vehicles that the municipality and different departments will buy. We'll establish what the criteria is for each vehicle. What are the operating parameters, like the, whether you need all-wheel drive or, heights of axle heights and so on. So we'll determine and do a business evaluation of the type of vehicle on each vehicle that we buy, and we'll have quotes come back, and we'll be coming back to council. So the final decision will rest with council as to which vehicle we buy in future. Project funding from depreciation reserves, and it supports the strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. Just to point out, the wastewater operators, they're called out to sites at 24/7 through all weather, so reliability of a good vehicle is important.
We have a question by Mayor McLean-Weil.
Just on the performance, we've had some EV vehicles, and what's our evaluation of the cost benefit to what we've already got and have been using? And I expect we should have information on that.
Yeah, and I think there's been some, I think Jeff has been doing some evaluation because he has a lot of vehicles with building services. I don't know if, Jeff, you want to comment? You've done some analysis now.
Perhaps it's better you bring it when we look at this.
When we
as
make
a-
the decision.
When we have a decision, but
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we have some good knowledge of what the costs have been versus the benefits of using the vehicles, and then looking at if we have to move from an EV to a hybrid or to move away from that completely, what our costs are here.
And other parameters, length of service, years, if it's 7 years, 10 years, there's a lot of different parameters. So that's why I think we'll take the time before it comes back to council to show the evaluation we go through. Next slide. Next one is the Osprey Village Commercial Center. This is the project, actually, our Deputy CAO reviewed this earlier. This is the what we have traditionally called the sidewalk project in Osprey Village. It's $250,000 this year, primarily in design fees, and next year we would construct the project in year 2 at a cost of approximately $4,750,000. And the main scope of this is to install sidewalks, curb and gutter down Nathan Cirilla Road and along Pine Grove Road to Highway 10. So that gives us a complete loop around this development. There is also a watercourse crossing down by the pump station, Nothing Fancy store. There's actually a watercourse running there that we have to extend the box culvert that we had to put in when we built Nathan Cirilla Road. There's stormwater infrastructure. We have allowed for traffic signals at the location there going into the Walmart at the foot of Nathan Cirilla, and a pedestrian crossing there as well. We're looking at lighting and seating as well. And further, I know we've had a presentation by Upland Planning on the beautification project. And that project, we've just done the community consultation, and our economic development folks have been spearheading that. And that's a project just in the development stages right now. We're not sure what recommendations are going to come back from that beautification. It hasn't really been scoped yet. There's been different ideas that came from community consultation. But until that comes forward, we've got some money in there budgeted for the beautification components of that project. I should also point out that we are going to be working closely with Nova Scotia Public Works Department on the traffic signaling. That is a provincial road, Pine Grove Road, as well. The sidewalk in that portion will be in the Public Works right away. So we'll be working closely with Public Works throughout that process, and they determine if lights are required. So we have allocated it in our budget, but they own the road and they'll determine the traffic flows and whether or not it's required or not. There's a 2-year funding, project funding. We have grants. This is fairly well supported through ICIP at $1,814,000, $204. The MCGP at $1.1 million. The AT fund that Alex Merrick pointed out this morning at $504,000. Municipal funding, CCBF, and operating reserves. So our operating reserves is just over $1 million at $1,044,823.
Stephen, could you also just restate where those traffic signal lights and that pedestrian crossing is?
Sure,
Could you restate it,
that would
please?
be at the foot of Nathan Cirilla Road, where it crosses Pine Grove Road into the Walmart shopping center. So that would be that. That's where that one is allocated for.
Right, thank you. Just so that everyone knows, we are going to have a break after we finish the part about Osprey Village before we move on to other parts of the municipality. Okay, just so we're aware.
Great, and this supports council's strategic priority of quality of life.
There are no questions, so just continue on, and if there's questions, I'll interrupt you.
Okay.
How's that? So just
Okay.
keep going.
Our next slide is the Osprey Village Water Tower, and we're looking at a capital cost this year in year 1 of $500,000 and in years 2 and 3 of $5.5 million. So the project description, we're looking initially at the site design and site preparation in year 1, assuming we get started. So it's necessary to service the anticipated growth in the Osprey and surrounding area. And the cost share, that's going to be cost shared with the Town of Bridgewater's Public Service Commission on a 50-50 basis. So we have project funding, ICIP grant of 73.3 and a third % grant based on a capital cost of $2.9 million. So our expected capital cost is considerably higher than when that was approved a number of years ago. And the balance of the cost is to be shared by MODL and TOB on a 50-50 basis. And it supports the strategic priority of regional economic development.
Just keep going.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, we do have a question by Councillor DeLong.
Yeah, sorry, I stuck my hand up. Do we have an agreement with the Public Service Commission for the cost sharing?
Yes, go ahead.
Yep. So actually, the cost sharing is with the Town of Bridgewater, and we do have an agreement that dates back to the days of the foundation of the LCLC, which provides that if a water tower is determined to be required for Osprey Village, then there would be cost sharing of the build, and it quantifies the contribution from the Town of Bridgewater. But the Town of Bridgewater also had a master study done of the area of town between the 325 and McCulloch Road, where the Tim Hortons is. And so their master plan has resulted in a change in the availability of water for the water tower, which caused a change in the water tower model, which is likely to cause it to be bigger. And as indicated in the slide, we're doing a review of the water requirements for all of Osprey Village and the town in that area to make sure that there's sufficient flow for all anticipated uses. So that project is being headed up by Larry Feener, and he's working with Public Service Commission staff to get a consultant to do that review. And then that will confirm the size requirements for the water tower. So we've sort of adjusted the project to not only provide the use that we see today, but the use that we anticipate to see in the future. And so we're trying to future-proof the project so that we don't build it and then find out we've already gone past the capacity.
I should point out that we have 2 proposals from design consultants to do the water study, and that'll be coming to council shortly for approval. And I should also mention we did go to RFP and we have a design firm, CBCL, have been awarded the design for the water tower project.
So we're going to take a break now.
Okay.
All right, and it'll be a 10-minute break, so please do come back to your seats at 10:48. 2-minute call. Just let me know. Okay, let me know. You let me know. Okay. Welcome back to our council meeting. We're going to continue on. Is Stephen able to continue on with the Cookville wastewater treatment plant budget? Thank you.
So our Cookville wastewater treatment plant is now in year 2 of 3. It's a 3-year project. And in year 2, which we're now in, we're projecting a capital cost of about $6.5 million, and our final year, next year, will be about $17 million, with the total capital cost of the project coming in at $24.5 million.
Stephen, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's one thing I have forgotten to say to those that are listening, that our live feed is on, and please remember that you can go to our audio recording on our website to hear our previous discussions, and we're sorry for the inconvenience that this may have caused. Continue on. Thank you.
Great. So this project is, I should mention, in the design firm is EXP Services, and the contractor on the project is Pomerleau, and the project is well underway now at this time. And the expansion of the plant is to service the growth in the Osprey Village area. There's project funding, ICIP grant of $6.67 million, MCGF funding of $4.1 million. We got an additional ICIP grant of $5.3 million. So MODL's cost is now down to $9.4 million. And that's being serviced by debt and reserves.
And we have a question by Mayor McLean-Weil.
So on a project of this magnitude, and given that we're going to borrow in 26, 27, am I right? In 26, 27, what do we view as the lifespan of a project like this? Is it 20 years or 15 years, 10 years? I have no idea.
I don't have the exact date, but normally I would say at least 25 years plus. Yeah. There's parts and pieces of equipment that we're continually updating and probably well in excess of that, but it just depends on the nature of the plant and technology and so on. In 25 years there may be more advanced technologies and whatever, but typically we can extend the life by proper maintenance. This project supports Council's strategic priority of infrastructure upgrade, expansion, and management. Our next project is the Nathan Cirillo pump station backup power, and this is year 2 of 2. And this is a pump station located just to the left of the Nothing Fancy store. And the project cost is $140,000. In our last year's capital budget, we had it broken into 2 years, $100,000 in year 1, which was last year, and $40,000 this year. And the reason why we had that split like that was we had to place the order because it's a 1-year order lead time. So we put $100,000 in last year's budget, and then we placed the order, and now we've carried it forward to this year. And $40,000 is for the installation. So the whole thing, we really haven't expended much in the way of cost to date, but most of it will be expended all in year 2 of 2. So this will provide site generator to supply backup power during power outages. And that'll be a permanent generator right on location, right besides. It's a fairly key pump station with a lot of Osprey Village feeding into it. The project funding comes from sewer reserves, and it supports Council's strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management.
I have a question by Councillor DeLong.
Thanks. Looking at the actual budget page, you said that it was $100,000 last year and $40,000 this year. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay, so it's showing $100,000 and $140,000 in the 2 separate items. Is the $100,000 a carryover, or?
$100,000 is a
Okay.
carryover.
Yeah, it just looks like it's listed twice then. Maybe I'm just reading it funny.
Yeah.
I could, through to Councillor DeLong, it's just that that's your approved budget from last year, but it wasn't expended. So we're just moving it forward to the current year. So when we're done, you'll see a forecasted, that slide will say 0. Yeah.
And Councillor Burns?
Good. Our next one refers to the Municipal Services Building, and it's the HVAC warranty repairs. There was some design errors on our HVAC system in this building, and so recognized by the design consultants, and they are in repair. We have yet to take over the building's HVAC system. They're still working on trying to finalize it. There's been a significant upgrade. The upgrades, we've projecting the cost this year as a carryover of around $50,000 to tidy up some loose ends until we're satisfied enough to take over the system. We're incurring the capital costs and have over the last several years, and we will be refunded that through the designer's insurance company. The insurance company has been notified. It's Dillon Consultants that did the HVAC design on this building. So we will be being reimbursed, but until then we carry the cost. So we're projecting about $50,000 this year to finish up. The project's being funded by general operating reserves and it'll be paid back by warranty. And it supports Council's strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. Next one is J-Class Roads Provincial Paving Partnerships, and we allocate $350,000 per year for that. And so this is a partnership in the J-Class Road capital upgrades and partnership with Nova Scotia Department of Public Works. We submitted our request once a year in the fall. We get to, council gets to put our request in as a priority of which J-Class roads we would like to see upgraded. And at the top of the list now is Darby's Head Road, followed by St. Augustine Road, Riverside, Freeman, Riverview, and Church. Those are the J-Class roads that council has identified as priority. And so we'll wait and see what the Department of Public Works will come back with in terms of moving ahead on one of those or any of those projects this year. Project funding comes from the Canada Community Building Fund, and it supports Council's strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management.
We have a question by Mayor McLean-Weil.
Can you give me some idea how we select those and put those in priority? Does somebody actually go and look at the road? And anyway, if you can
Yes.
outline that process.
Sure. Historically, the Public Works have given us sort of a rating. They rate a lot of those public roads, and they score them into what condition in different categories. And then we go out, our engineers go out and assess them as well. And then we develop kind of a priority list that we come back to council and discuss them. And then between staff recommendations and council's input and recommendations, we come up with a priority list. And we typically have had, historically, the last number of years, 6 or 8 roads on that list. And as one gets done off the top, the other ones go up. And then sometimes council will add one at the bottom. But we haven't had any additions in recent years because there's been quite a backlog on the list. But there is some, and then Public Works do their own evaluation when they come. They see our selection or our request, and then they do their own evaluation and come back with what they're prepared to go forward with. So there's a bit of a technical analytical component, and then council has input to the selection.
Councillor Reinhardt?
Thank you. Just for my clarification, these J-class roads are provincial roads, correct?
They are provincial, and
Okay.
it's through a service exchange that goes back to the 1990s, and we have an obligation, or we cost share any capital upgrades 50/50 on that one class of roads, provincially owned.
Okay, and is that the only provincial road that we provide funding for?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. Of the 700, of the 700,000 from our current year, how much of it have we used so far?
Of this, there was no roads award, no J-class road work awarded to MODL last year.
So we still have the 700,000 that we haven't used.
Yes.
That's,
Although I think they're often a year later billing. Sometimes they don't bill for a year or 2 years after the work is done. So
okay.
I think we got a bill last year for
Because one of the things I was wondering about is, in previous years, it's always been more than the $350,000 that we are asked to pay, and then we have to decide. So I'm just wondering if the $350,000 is sufficient amount to put there. Deputy Mayor, Alex Demare, I mean, the Deputy CAO.
I had serious concerns sitting this far down the table. I'm not looking for a promotion. I thought that maybe some background information would be helpful just to understand. So as your Director of Engineering has pointed out, this is the result of a service exchange that is now some 30 years old, but the remnants are still in place. So just for total clarity, the District of Lunenburg is not responsible for the maintenance of any of the J-class roads, but as part of this financial agreement between the province and the municipalities, there was a nominal per kilometer amount that's paid annually out of our operating budget towards the Department of Transportation. The number was chosen based on a spreadsheet that was created, which was called J-class roads, but in fact doesn't correspond with all of your J-class roads, and some of the roads on it aren't J-class roads, and some municipalities, likely due to whatever political maneuvering was happening at the time, ended up with 0 J-class roads. So they don't pay any of these contributions, and they don't have any of the roads indicated as part of this agreement. So we have a long list of them, and we don't have any ability to impact maintenance on them. So if residents may call and suggest, I need you to do something about this, it's a J-class road, we have no greater ability to influence the actual, like snow clearing, for example, or ditching on these roads than any other provincial road. On the capital side, as part of the agreement, the province has said they won't upgrade roads that are on the J-class list. So if you want paving put on there, for example, they won't do it unless there's 50% cost share. And then there's this long process of establishing what our priorities are and submitting them to the province, and they have a small pot that they allocate all across the province. So sometimes you get some, sometimes you don't. What we do know is every year that you do get them, the estimate that they provide is less than what the tender will come back as. So you get told, yep, you got your Darby's Head Road, and we think it's going to cost $180,000. It goes out to tender. You have $180,000 in your budget, and it comes back sometimes double that. If it's over 10%, they have to come back to you and get your approval to pay for that overage. So at that time, you look at what did you have in your budget. If there is not enough there, then you can dip into your reserves for that, or you go ahead with that. But it's really important to remember, you don't have any greater ability to affect the maintenance on these roads. They're not your roads. But if you want to see any kind of capital upgrades to them, you have to chip in half of the funding for it. And if we don't do the roads, I believe Elena's checking on this, but if we don't do the roads, then the funds fall back to your general reserves. Stay in the gas tax, that's right. Yeah.
Councillor Vino?
And further to Mayor McLean Wiles' point, and for further context for new councillors, back in November 2020, the council of the day met with engineering and presented all the J-class roads and gave them paving priority points. And that was the list that we submitted, at that time, 5. We've never come back and met as a group because there's been so little leeway with the lists that we've sent in year after year. There was one road done a year and a half, 2 years ago, which was the Point Road in Blue Rocks. And we've added one more to the list. But again, since there's been so little movement of those roads, we haven't come back as a group, assuming that the roads that needed to be done back in 2020 still need to be done in 2025.
Councillor DeLong?
Thank you. Thanks for the historical context, Mr. Demark. This is something I've always been curious about. How were the roads initially established? Because there's certain districts that have J-class roads and others that don't. Is it just what was most convenient at the day for the province? Or do we know?
It's what made the list. Too bad you're not in Argyle. They don't have any.
All right, continue on.
Sure.
Mr. Pace?
I will add that typically the province asks for council's recommendations in the fall of every year. So I believe it was made in September, just before the election. So a lot of the new councils wouldn't have gone through that process, but typically it's an annual request that we put in. Next one, this is Summer Road. It's off of, it's a small cul-de-sac off of Toma Road. It's a municipal road, municipally owned. And we're looking at a project cost of $65,000 there. And the description of that work is to upgrade the storm drainage system, widen out the cul-de-sac, and to grade and gravel. It's just a small section of road. But project funding is to come from general operating reserves and supports council's strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. This is a gravel road. It's not. It's just to bring it up to a certain standard for easy access of emergency vehicles, and there has been some drainage concerns on that section of road. Center School demolition and remediation.
We have a question first
Where-
by the mayor.
Where is it?
It's just off of Toma.
I don't know where that is.
Toma.
Camperdown?
Pardon?
It's
Is
in
it?
District 1 in Italy Cross.
Italy Cross, yeah. It's just a small, Toma runs along a lake, and then Summer's just off of that. Good. So Center School demolition remediation, we're looking at a project cost there of $5.5 million. We've had, it was in year one, which is this past year, to do all of the environmental assessment work. So we had Strum Consulting performed phase 2 and 3 environmental site assessments this year, and we've also had them do the hazmat survey, that's all the hazardous material in the building, and also estimate the demolition costs. So that was all done in year one, and that's in preparation now for actually removing the building and doing any soil remediation necessary. It also gets what we would call shelf-ready, because we would look at project funding. I say here project would not proceed without grant funding. Typically, project funding, we usually try to get 73 1/3% of a grant, and then the balance being funded from general operating reserves. And this is what we did accomplish in the Riverport School, demolition and site remediation. We were successful in getting 73% funding on that. So now that we have it shelf ready, we have been speaking with our grant coordinator, and she is out trying to find funding opportunities for the project. So to break the cost down, the $5.5 million, there's two components to it. One is the actual building, building of all the, removing the hazmat and demolition of the building, and then there's the soil remediation. And to give you some perspective, the building hazardous material and demolition is a fairly a more defined number. There's some choices on the soil remediation side. There's what we call Tier 1 and Tier 2 clearance with Nova Scotia Environment. In the case of Tier 1 allows you to clean the soil to the point that you can have potable water on that property. Tier 2 leaves the contamination on site, but there's a monitoring program in place. So in the case of Riverport School, Council of the Day decided to clear to Tier 1, allowing potable water. And it is more, it can be considerably more expensive depending on what is involved. And for folks around the table that were here for Riverport School, we got the building down quickly and then the soil removed, the contaminated soil identified, but then the contamination went into the groundwater. So we had to do a series of chemical injections over where it was clean, and each one of those injections costs money, and so it took a lot longer. But we had adequate funding, and so the decision was made that way that piece of land could be used for any purpose, including for potable water in future. For this project, we probably don't have quite the same need to clean it to Tier 1, but it'll be Council's decision. We do own the adjoining property where the soccer fields is and where the former jail site was. We do own that property as well. So if there's some development that we want to use that whole sort of property for, those two properties, we could always possibly put the potable water component on the adjoining one. So it reduces the need to reach a Tier 1, but the approximate spread is between the low and high is about between 4.8 and 5.5 million. So 4.8 is probably on the very low side, and Council may decide they want to remove all the soil but just not do all the groundwater monitoring, which you'd end up with a price somewhere in the middle. So as far as a budget number, I put in here so the worst case Tier 1, and that allows us to go seek funding based on that budget number. So we can seek grant funding, and then it reserves a sort of desire of Council down the road to see which they would. So you're not forced to make that decision now. If we go with the higher budget, we can make that determination, or even as the project progresses.
Councillor Vina?
Excited to see this come forward. I know residents will also be happy, and I'm hopeful that we'll receive grant funding. I just have a question about the two different tier statuses. If we were to move forward with Tier 2, down the road, if that property is deemed that the soil does need to be cleaned up, can you do that later? I am cautious of that without knowing what the future holds, to go with Tier 2 and not with Tier 1.
There would always be the opportunity to go with it, and funding may make that decision. If you can get the, funding up front to get it to Tier 1, it may be more advantageous just to do it up front. But if we're not successful in getting the level of funding we're comfortable with, we could always go to Tier 2 and then later go to Tier 1 as a future project.
Mrs. Wenzel, you have a comment?
Thank you, Councillor Oikel. Just through on this project, just so council's aware, now that we have an upgraded hazmat assessment on this property, I will have to set up an asset retirement obligation for Center School. We do have one set up already based on a past ESA assessment, probably 2017, I'd like to say. It was quite a long time ago.
Yes.
It's a requirement of the Public Sector Accounting Manual that we set up an asset retirement obligation for assets that we have are legally for legal obligations upon disposal of assets. A lot of it has to do with asbestos. So if there's any new numbers through that assessment, I'm going to have to review it, and I may have to adjust your liability, and you will see that come to you when we do our year end. But I'm just making you aware now that that number could increase on what we have as a liability on our books.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. Can you give me some sense of, do we take multiple bids on something like this for a site cleanup?
Yes, once we have the, all the consultant reports, it goes to tender.
Okay,
So-
and thank you. And the follow-up is just, clearly we have some choices between the levels of cleanup. And I wasn't obviously here with the Riverport School, but is it something that we should try to be anticipating the use of it so that we do it in the most efficient way, or what has happened previously?
I think I think that it's up to council what level, and you do predict what you'd want. It's really council's decision how far you want to go with it, and I think it's satisfactory either way, and you'll get they're informed either way if you go to Tier 1, Tier 2. There's an ongoing monitoring requirement, and we did this actually at the MARC facility where we have soil contamination identified here a number of years ago, and that went underneath the program building. And we did groundwater monitoring around the plume area and found it wasn't migrating. So it's on record, and it's just left there. So you can do it either way.
Thank you. Just a last follow-up. So for the maximum potential benefit, whether we were considering it for housing or even for sale, does that really inform us of the level that we should be going for the gold standard so that we could either put homes on it or sell it or have another use? I mean, if it's a power generation station, it's different than a residential housing cluster, for example.
Exactly. So
And was any of this conversation about that property, has that already happened over the time that we've been discussing taking that down?
there's been a lot of future possibilities economic development have worked on over the years, but
I believe that Dave can respond to that. Stephen?
Yeah, just for reference, and there's been significant work done on Center School, particularly over the last 10 years. I would love to see something like a housing project on Center School. I will tell you that is near virtually impossible. I would not recommend taking Center School to Tier 1 simply because there has been analysis and investigation done on the water that relates to Center School, and the water quantity is insufficient to do any level of housing, and the water quality is insufficient to do any level of housing. The only opportunity you would have with the Center School property, should you do a housing project, is to re-engage a line from Dares Lake that the Center School used to use. That would be a significant cost. What you may want to do is look at Tier 2 and expand on your current recreation abilities to that, to extend fields or something else, because that you could do quite easily. But I would caution strongly this council to not to consider housing We have done that multiple times, and we can give you the analysis. It just, the water is not there.
Mayor McLean Weil?
And my question goes back to like how we state the liability, and is it based on the cost of cleanup? Is that the liability that we record, the value of the asset? How is it recorded? And it's recorded as a liability with a note to the financial statements? How does that appear then?
Certainly, through to the mayor. So the asset retirement liability is only in regards to the legal obligation you might have as a municipal unit when we retire an asset. And our understanding of it is essentially it's asbestos. So if there's asbestos in the building, you're legally required to dispose of that in a certain way. So the last ESA assessment or hazmat assessment that engineering had done when I had to set up the asset retirement obligations, this is probably the second year or third year in our financial statements that they've had to appear, was I took that survey at the time, and they said, okay, it's going to cost, I think about $1 million, I think we had in that budget, that I set up a liability just for the asbestos in center school. So if there's other things that are legally required to be disposed of, I have to go back through this hazmat assessment, but it won't be 5.5 million. It won't be the whole thing. It will be a portion of it depending on what our legal obligation is. And I'll work with our auditors on that, as I did when we set it up to begin with. But it's something new in public sector accounting that all municipal units had to set up retirement obligations. So we instead of amortizing them, we accrete them. So every year we kind of add to that obligation until the obligation expires. So if center school gets torn down, the obligation, it no longer exists. But you do have a liability set up there. The liability that we have right now in our books is fully funded. That just for the disposal, that money's there already, ready to be spent on it. So that's not really affecting, it's in your capital fund. So just so you know, it's a complicated new thing that we were required to do, but it won't be the whole 5.5. It'll be some portion thereof, depending on what we can find through this assessment that was just done.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like us to consider the Tier 1 as it's being proposed here by engineering. I think we need to be seen as being good stewards of the land, especially when looking for funding. It doesn't necessarily, by having Tier 1, it doesn't limit future growth or choices for that property. However, we've already been told that high-density housing is not an option in that area. And while I suggest Tier 1, we can always move down to Tier 2 at the time of taking on the project, unless there's certain parameters in the funding that came from other sources. But it would be much harder moving up if we were to go for Tier 2 now. So it's like going to the car lot and seeing that nice vehicle that you want. You might have to settle for one without a sunroof. But if you don't set your parameters when you're going out on that lot, you limit your opportunities down the line.
Councillor Vino?
Just one final confirmation, Stephen. So Center School now is ready to come down pending grant funding.
That's right.
All
It's
testing
shelf-ready.
has been done.
It was
It's
just a
just
matter
sitting
of-
there.
And preparing the tender documents and so on.
Going forward. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I should just highlight too, we just received these estimates last week. Strum had been working all last year on all these assessments, so it's fairly new. I pressured them to get for budget, so we haven't had a lot of time to digest them. But the building component of the project is actually a bigger. It's roughly 4.2 million, and the soil remediation to Tier 1 is only 1.1 million, and then there's other net HST and professional fees on top of that bring it to the 5.5. So really it's about a 4-to-1 ratio for the building to the soil remediation. So the Tier 1, Tier 2, in the percentage of the overall project isn't as big. It's not. It's like 700,000 on 5.5 million. it's not a huge, it's not like doubling the project scope.
Councillor Brown, you have a further comment?
Well, when you look at that proposal that came in, the majority for the building, structure part of it, and then the smaller part for the option of how clean the soil will be at the end, is there actually two funding opportunities from two different sources or two different applications that could make that decision easier?
I've spoken to our grant coordinator. She's on the lookout for funding opportunities. The last one was one project, one funding source for everything. And really our priority right now is the building. It is causing a lot of grief for our staff in maintaining it. There's regular vandalism on site. And so, but the last time it was one funding source. So we're looking at all options now. And we're hoping that we'd like to have it done. It'll be in this year's budget, and so, but we may not get any funding for 1 or 2 years until there's it's hard to predict when the funding opportunity will come in reality.
Councillor Brooks?
Just for my understanding, when we do a project like that, and there will be different elements like soil remediation and then the hazmat with the asbestos, typically do we have one entity that subcontracts to all of those, or do we subcontract ourselves do we tender to the different elements of that project?
In the case of Riverport School, and I've done a lot of demolition projects over the years, you have a site professional, which in this case has been Strum Environmental or Strum Consulting, and they oversee the whole process. And typically, you would go to tender for the whole project, and a general contractor that does demolition work would take the project, and then they sub out different portions of it. They sub out, like say the hazmat is typically subbed out to a specialist in that area. Other hazard materials in the building are in particular lead paint, PCBs. Asbestos is the biggest component of it, but there are other hazardous materials that they've identified through these documents and multiple tests and so on. But typically it goes out to tender to a general, and they sub it out, and then we monitor it. The frustrating part with Riverport School was that the building came down very short order, actually during the pandemic, and then the site remediation, removal of the contaminated soil that was visible, went fairly slick. It was getting to tier 1, the injections that we had to keep doing. It's like, how far are we going to keep going with this? We had really that project came in way under budget. We had a really good funding source, and everything came in the tender way below budget. So we had funding available to keep persevering. It was more time, and how long is this going to take? Every round of injections was another 20,000. I think we did 4 of them. But we ended up getting tier 1 in the end, which was worth it in the end. Just that long stage, you wonder, are we doing the right thing? Should we? There was that, and that could be the council's decision too, in any project, how far we want to go as we try to achieve tier 1.
Continue.
The next one is an annual $60,000 capital cost to green compost carts. And so this is an annual amount for replenishing the inventory, and they're purchased by MJSB annually, and they're distributed to property owners by GE All Trucking, our solid waste collection provider. And those are all, MJSB tenders for all the green cards for all the participating participants in the solid waste contract. It's funded through depreciation reserves and supports our strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. Wiles Lake Barn, there's an old barn located on the property, which has been vacant for a number of years. A few years ago, we did demolish 2 smaller buildings, but this building has a sliding door on it, and it's getting to the point now where it's been deemed unsafe. We've had to board up the access to the building because the doors was going to fall in, so it creates a hazard and danger to anyone, including staff. So This is a new project that we're bringing forward this year, is to demolish that vacant barn building and fund it out of general operating reserves, and supports council's strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. There are no hazardous materials in that building, it's just the building itself. Our next item is an annual,
I'm sorry
Sorry.
to interrupt you, Stephen,
Sure.
but we have a question. Councillor DeLong?
Yeah, thank you. So there's no hazardous materials in that building. What about the other building that's
the other
in year
building
two?
does have hazardous materials.
That include?
Asbestos in
Okay.
particular. Yeah, we did have an assessment done, a preliminary one just for asbestos, done a year or so ago for financial purposes. We decided to leave that building until the Wiles Lake reimagining, visioning project is done, so that just to make sure it's not going to fill some future role. But this one is posing an immediate sort of safety risk. So we started this program a few years ago of annual large pump replacement and rebuilding program for our wastewater plants, and we've been allocating $25,000 per year. The purpose of this is to have accessible pumps that we can replace if there's a breakdown. This is for, sometimes these pumps are long delivery items, 6 months, 10 months. So we're looking at the Nathan Cirilla, that's the NC, Nathan Cirilla pump station. We have no spare pump for that pump station. And in New Germany, either pump station 1, 2, or 5. And these are to have readily available if you have a breakdown of a pump on a Sunday, Christmas Day, during a snowstorm, you need to have some inventory of replacement pumps. So it's going to be funded out of sewer reserves, strategic priority of council, of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. This came up from discussion by council a few weeks ago, is questioning the wastewater treatment options, and particularly for the wastewater treatment plants in New Germany and Concrel Bank. What is the best long-term option there? So we've allocated $125,000 to have a study of looking at different options in those two communities, to be funded from sewer reserves with the strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. And by doing this study too, we've also deferred a couple of other capital projects into the next year, following year, until this study is done, just so that we don't spend money that the study reveals that we should be doing something different. This is a new initiative that we plan to allocate $20,000 per year into annual manhole cover repair and replacement program. Some of our collection systems are older, and some of these manhole covers are actually buried in the gravel about 2 feet down, making maintenance really difficult, and they're aging. And so we decided to sort of pick away and as an annual basis and do an annual program to uncover and adjust to grade, repair and replace manhole covers to allow access for maintenance and monitoring of our sewer systems. Fund it from depreciation reserves and supporting our strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management. Next one is New Germany wastewater treatment.
Just hold a moment. You have a question, Councillor Moore, regarding them.
Thank you. Pardon me? No. Okay, thank you. Through you to Stephen. The study on treatment options for the New Germany plant, $125,000. You said that there was other capital things that was deferred because of.
Yeah, the one that there was two that we had proposed. One is the Concrel Bank caustic soda
Right.
project that we had last year, we had planned to do. We had a budget of $350,000. We had the design done, tendered, and two prices came in over $1 million. So we didn't proceed with that project based on the scope that it was in. So the idea, we were going to rescope the project and perhaps try to do more of it in-house, acting as almost more of a general and piecing out the project and doing more ourselves in-house and trying to bring that budget more in line. But not knowing, what direction we would be going, we decided to defer that. And another one we deferred is in New Germany. It was proposed to have permanent pump station generators at each pump station, and we do have the mobile one now that we do have in service now, just receiving. So we have a mobile generator for the 6 pump stations there. But we had looked at looking at starting to look at doing one a year of putting permanent ones in, but it's quite involved because there's land acquisition, there's design, and we're probably looking at about a $200,000 per pump station budget.
Okay.
So those are examples of ones that we deferred.
Thank you.
New Germany wastewater plant, we've been having some pH challenges there, which is fairly new for that plant. And so we're looking at and dissolved oxygen probe, and we're looking at a budget of $18,000. So it's to supply and install new pH probes and dissolved oxygen sensors to monitor and adjust treatment process to ensure regulatory compliance. So these would make it easier where we have had challenges and we've been out of non-compliant at some intervals on the pH. At New Germany, which is a relatively new thing, as I mentioned. So we're looking at funding those out of reserves and having it supports Council's strategic priority of infrastructure upgrades, expansion, and management.
Question by Mayor McLean-Weil.
I probably need a lesson in sewage here, but why would, for a system that's been in place for some time, why would the pH be changing? Like, do you have ideas about what contributes to that?
There's some different theories. We've had the same problem in Concourse Bank recently, over the last number of years, and we've been doing that on a manual basis. That was what our project was, to do more of a permanent kind of a, rather than more ad hoc. So it could be a number of things, environmental or users, things that are going into the system. So we haven't really identified it yet. And we've been working, Larry and his group and the operators have been working on it for a couple of years in Concourse Bank. We have come up with a solution of adding this caustic soda, which brings the pH in line. But it has been a problem off and on, but it's becoming more regular. So we're don't really have any answers right now.
Will the project we're looking at look at some of these? Like, to me, there's, yeah, I guess I don't have a question, but that I'm ready to articulate yet.
Deputy CAO.
Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but so our wastewater treatment plants have regular reporting that we have to do, so regularly sampling. And pH as well as other things are measured in the effluent from the plant and reported to the province?
Yes, we do regular ongoing testing, and whenever something is non-compliant, we have to notify our environment. And we do annual reports. Actually, we've got Larry's just getting ready to submit all 3 reports for our 3 wastewater plants now. There's other reporting, like Cookville, for example. We had a 10-year sort of agreement in place, and we had to reapply for that every 10 years, which is even a more extensive application. So there's a lot of regulatory oversight on these plants, and they're informed every time there's anything is out of compliance.
So projects like these would come about when our senior engineer identifies issues and wants to address root causes.
Yeah.
So that we have the regular reporting, and then the capital projects that you're seeing are coming about because we're noticing issues with our reporting. And so we're trying to make sure that we remain in compliance. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's right.
Okay. So if you're interested, before next Thursday, we can get a little more information on particularly what's happening with this one.
And it's never possible to be 100% compliant. Typically, you'll see a data with dots all over, and then your approval limits. So sometimes you may get the odd one, but these are becoming more prevalent now. So.
Mayor McLean, wow.
Well, part of the reason that we even are talking about this study is that the cost, the maintenance cost on smaller systems, particularly the Concro Mill system, or Concro Bank system, the New Germany is much larger. But if we're thinking about what new systems might look like, are these problems that are showing up, if it's a provincial monitoring program, there may be information that would be and I'm sure you'll look at this, valuable to us in a review of this, that look at how some of the changes, whether it be environmental or usage of the systems, how that may be influencing what we need to think about for the future.
Yeah.
And what systems are perhaps more current to deal with some of these issues. And I think it does point out and reinforce why this may be important in us being well-informed to make decisions about what systems might look like as we go forward, particularly in New Germany, where we're thinking there's a new school, potentially that's a growth area in terms of housing, and that system, if we're going to have a system that really works well, and it is, as I understand, and I stand to be corrected, a system that likely needs significant investment in the years to come and not too distant.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we've got the right system for the needs we are anticipating. So I'm happy to see that we're going to dig into this.
And typically, as in the Cookeville expansion project, the consultants in cooperation with our team here looked at all different options, like 6 different technologies, and outruled each one. So you would never go into a big capital project of a wastewater expansion or upgrade without going through a similar evaluation each time. So.
I don't see any other questions. Is there any more for you, Stephen?
No, he's at the end.
All right, so we're going over to planning with Jeff Merrill.
Yeah, so this project is the land conservation strategy, $50,000. This would identify and map all the environmentally sensitive areas in the municipality. And this will help us, have a plan for as we procure and protect and conserve land. It also help us attract external stakeholders and find some of those matching funds as we move to meet the target of 20% land protected by 2030. And this is funded from the Sustainability Reserve. Next slide. Public transit, in the capital budget, we have $150,000. This is for a transit route that includes Osprey Village. There is funds from the gas tax earmarked for this. And that's been a carryover since, I guess, 23-24 fiscal year. And this would be for $150,000, you would get a used bus.
Question by Councillor Smith.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you were finished with this slide, but I was just going to say, I would love if we could have climate mentioned as a strategic priority here whenever we talk about public transit. It is in the LCAP, right?
It is correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Good catch. The e-permit platform, this is $150,000. This replaces our existing permit tracking system. This system would be a regional-based, so this includes us and our 3 partners under the Regional Inspection Services, which is Bridgewater, Town of Lunenburg, and the Region of Queens. We did receive funding from the province, and so we have a $91,250 allocated towards the capital portion of that funding. And yeah, as your strategic priorities, this is infrastructure upgrade, expansion, management. And just a little bit more about maybe the e-permit system. So this would be, right now we have an e-permit system that staff uses and it's not public facing. This one will be a public facing, so folks will be able to submit their building permit online, pay for it online. This is in the system that I'll get more into the system next week. We have the award coming on the 11th. But this will be, people will be able to book their inspections online. They'll be able to apply for their permits, whether that's building development, any heritage development agreements, all will be done online. Yeah.
I have a question. Is this 150 our portion of the project, or is that for everybody? Because I'm assuming the e-permitting platform is for our partners as well, correct?
Yeah, it's for all. So we're like the host unit, so that's for the system itself. So in our operating, there is a revenue side for regional inspection services. So that some of that revenue is earmarked to pay for this capital.
Thank you. Continue, thank you.
We have $50,000 for land purchases for conservation. And this is out of our sustainability reserves. And this would be as land comes up, or if most of the time nonprofit organizations will come to council looking for partnership to purchase some conservation land. So this earmarks some funds to be able to do that if an opportunity arises.
Councillor DeLong?
Thanks. I just want to make sure that I understand the 2 separate budget items regarding land conservation. There's one here in year 1 for $50,000 that's to identify potential conservation areas, and then there's the $50,000 annually for reserves for those projects? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Do we have an estimate of what it will take per year to meet that 20% target? Like, is the 50,000 per year kind of in the, do we have an estimate that 20% is based on?
No, I don't have a total number to get to, that 20%. And of course, the 20% doesn't always have to be all municipal. It could be provincial, federal, could be nonprofit organizations as well. But we're looking for hit that target. But as we go through, that's one of the things that we would look at, like if we're identifying all the lands in the municipality, we'd also set so what are the targets? How much funds do we need to be setting aside? $50,000 is probably on the low end for achieving that target, but it is a placeholder and gives a little something if an opportunity arises.
Continue on, please.
I think that's the last.
Oh, you're done.
That was, yeah, we'll move
All
on
right,
to.
so we'll move on to recreation, parks, and tourism. Oh, we have a question still by Councillor DeLong.
Yeah, sorry. So I don't see anything under planning for 2040. Is everything captured in the operating budget for the 2040 project?
Correct, yeah, there's no capital items. The MODL 2040 it will be like operations, will be staff time, mail outs, marketing stuff, which is not capital.
Yep, follow up?
Thank you. So during the operating budget discussion, I asked about dry hydrants, and it was said that that had been moved in error to the capital budget and then taken out of the capital budget. Is it being put back in the operating budget for the next time we see it?
We don't have anything in there. I foresee that we have some policy development work to do with the Fire and Emergency Services Committee. So I was surprised and happy to see that planning had moved ahead with something in the capital budget. But once we'd had more conversations, I don't actually see it in this year's budget.
Do you have further comments regarding that, Councillor DeLong? Okay. And so we'll move on to Department of Recreation with our Director, Trudy Payne.
Thank you, Chair and Council. Many of the recreation, parks, and tourism capital projects reflected in your 2025-26 budget is based on direction staff did receive at the special council meeting or direction from other committee or council meetings, and of course, looking at a variety of documents such as our park standards document, the park accessibility audit report that was conducted on 5 of our parks, and Saw Pit Wharf concept plan, just some examples of the documents that we refer to. So this slide specifically talks about the MARC facility reimagining, and we have a project cost of approximately $80,000. The MARC reimagining and public consultation has been in the 5-year capital plan and has been moved to this fiscal year. The MARC is one of the 3 regional parks that's outlined in our park standards document. At the special council meeting, council discussed having better plans in place, like the one developed for Saw Pit, before making major upgrades to our parks, and that our focus should begin with our regional parks. The MARC is a park that's been well utilized over the years, especially when the program and administrative buildings were available for public use. Of course, since COVID and due to some safety concerns, council made the decision to keep the buildings closed for public use. So that's part of the reason why this got moved up to this year as well in the 5-year capital. And so the budget that you see reflects the estimated cost to issue an RFP to engage a firm to conduct the public consultation, develop the concept plan with Class D cost. Planning assistance grants will be applied for from the province to hopefully help offset the cost for this project and for the Wiles Lake reimagining, which is the next slide. Are there any questions? Okay. The next slide is the Wiles Lake. So again, Wiles Lake is one of the 3 regional parks identified in our park standards document. Similar to the reasoning provided for the MARC, staff are recommending undertaking a public consultation process for Wiles Lake to help inform a concept plan. The other regional park is River Ridge, and at this point is essentially at the maintenance stage. And again, the planning assistance grants would be applied for to encompass both the MARC and the Wiles Lake consultation, and it would be staff's intent to issue one RFP for both parks, so we'd work with one firm on both of these consultation projects. Hopefully we would get a better costing if we do it that way.
Could you please explain Class D budgets?
Class D budgets is really based on the concept plan. It's the lowest kind of budgeting that you have, and each time you, like if you get to the engineering plans, you're going to get moved to a Class A budget, which gives you more concrete. So this is really just high-level costing at the concept plan. I don't know if I described that well enough, but our Director of Engineering, is that correct? Okay. And I guess I'm reading my notes, but the anticipated project funding is to come from general operating reserves for both of these projects, and of course, they address the strategic priority of quality of life.
Councillor DeLong, you have a question?
Yeah, so staff is confident that a Class D budget will give us enough accuracy to proceed.
Concept plans, part of the RFP, they would be developing Class D budgets so that we can make better, more informed decisions as we move along. So you have a rough. You'll notice in the 5-year capital budget, I don't really have any cost to implementing Wiles Lake reimagining or the Mark Reimagining, because I really don't know what's going to come from the public consultation, and I don't know what costs are associated with that. So I suspect that's going to be a discussion as we go to next year's budget and next year 5-year capital. But the first phase is getting this done. So based on costs that we spent on Saw Pit Wharf concept plan, we feel these are fairly accurate.
Can continue, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next slide is the Mark Ball Field, and we have a project cost of about $150,000, and this is to extend the fencing on the ball fields and reposition 4 of the dugouts. So this installation of additional fencing will be on all 3 ball fields, which is approximately 1,000 feet in total. Currently, all fields have 2 sides and the backstops fenced. The additional fencing will completely enclose the field. Not that this has happened at the Mark, but other fields have had damage from all-terrain vehicles or vehicles. We're lucky that it hasn't happened at the Mark yet. This would completely enclose that and help mitigate some of that risk. It's also to install service and user gates for field access and to replace the backstop fences. The existing ones are worn and should be replaced rather than to be continually repaired. And it's to move 4 of the dugouts to correct the locations. The 4 dugouts on the top 2 fields were installed too far away from the backstops, and the footings have been heaving, so this will allow for those backstops to those dugouts to be leveled and the heaving problem eliminated and more user-friendly for the ball field players that are at the field. The project funding is proposed to come from the Canada Community Building Fund, and this would meet many of your strategic priorities, actually, but we focused on the infrastructure upgrades and expansion and management.
Councillor Brooks?
Just a question on those dugouts. When were those installed, and who installed them incorrectly?
That would have been quite some time ago. The Mark Ball Fields have been there since before I even started working for
So a
MODL.
historic thing.
Yeah, it is historic, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Continue, please.
Okay. Wayfinding, this is a carryover from last year of $340,000. I think there was $425 that was budgeted. This is a multi-year project to install signage at our municipal parks. This was supposed to be completed in December, but we've been having some exchanges with the company that was awarded. We are anticipating that all will be completed by April, the first part of May, before our parks open for the season, and that funding is to come from the Canada Community Building Fund. And this is a contract that's already awarded, just for council's information. The next is an internal park wayfinding strategy, and this you'll see over your 5-year capital plan. The first year is $25,000 to develop an internal park wayfinding strategy that aligns with the current wayfinding strategies and designs. This was repeatedly mentioned in our 2023 park surveys, that when people went into our parks, they wanted to have more directional signage, interpretive signage that would lead them, maybe Church Lake, if people are familiar, you might not need as many wayfinding signs, but when you get into Miller Point Peace Park, that would be, you can go on various different trails and different, different amenities in that park. So to have we would like to have a strategy that aligns, and then we would implement the actual installation of these signs, and we would do it park by park as budget allows. So general operating reserves is the project funding, and the strategic priority, again, could meet many, but we selected quality of life. The next project is the Hillside Cemetery Monument. This was, if council will recall, there was a couple of residents that had did some research, and we did have approval from council to verify that research with the Social Genealogical Society. This may lead to the rock plaque and the interpretive panel being updated, but we have budgeted for that in our operating grant. Once this research is completed, staff will report back to council. Part of the plan is to erect a monument at the cemetery, enabling family members the ability to place the name of family members on the monument. $150,000 has been budgeted to ensure sufficient funds would be in place. I did send an email out through the AMA list server, and I did speak with somebody locally who has moved a few monuments and has been involved with monuments of this size. And that's hence where the 150,000 placeholder budget came from. An RFP would be issued with criteria that the monument would need to have meet such criteria as low maintenance, be resilient to the weather. We would want longevity. We wouldn't want to be replacing this monument. But it would really depend upon the proposals that come in and the kind of structure we're trying to. I'd like to have a proposal so there's some creativity. So at this point in time, without having that issued, knowing exactly what kind of stone or material that they'd be proposing to have this built with, that's hence why the 150,000. General operating reserves is the recommendation for the project funding, and the strategic priority is quality of life. Sir. Okay, Miller Point Peace Park. This project involves upgrading some existing pathways, such as for new surfacing and sloping, creating a new accessible trail around the New Point Loop Trail, and creating a new access trail that anybody that's been at Miller Point Peace Park, we call the outer parking lot and the inner parking lot. Right now, there's a roadway that both vehicles and pedestrians, cyclists, people with strollers need to access the inner parking lot. When it came out through our park survey and through our accessibility audits, the recommendation that there would be an accessible trail that would lead from the outer to the inner parking lot. So that, and the other part of this project is the construction of an accessible canoe and kayak boat launch. So the estimated cost for this total project is $478,000. We have made application to the province through their expansion trail grant, and we're anticipating $150,000 from that grant, and we have applied for an accessibility funding for the boat launch and anticipate likely receiving $20,000 for that. The remaining funds would come from, it's proposed to come from the Canada Building Fund or the gas tax. This would align with our park audits and also with our park surveys. And it is, I believe, the number 2 most visited park that came from that survey. So again, strategic priority is quality of life.
There are no questions, but I do want to make a comment that I have been to this park many times, and I've probably been one of the people that have created that non-accessible trail, because I know there is a trail from the parking lot to the other one, but it's definitely not accessible. It's a lot of roots and rocks, but a lot of us use it.
That's often what happens, is people create the pathways that they want to take, and then that's a good indication of the pathway you should design. All right, Indian Falls, accessibility upgrades. This would be reflective of what was in the park audits. So the project description, what we're proposing is, if anybody's been to Indian Falls, when you drive in the grassy area and the look-off area, creating accessible pathways and an accessible picnic area for that area, and that's estimated at $50,000. To upgrade one of the trails to be fully accessible, it doesn't quite meet the grade, so to bring that up to accessibility standards, which is the one that would lead down to the river, which would be very beneficial. And part of the project, in line with the park's accessibility audits, is accessible vault toilets. And based on the new designs that engineering just had completed, we're estimating $250,000 for. This does not include change rooms, so I just want to clarify that. These would be 2 vault accessible toilets. This would pretty much, other than the really high end of like paving the driveway that goes in, this would cover most of the medium, low to medium cost proposals that was in that park accessibility plan, other than a couple of accessible parking spaces, and depending on the scope of the work, they may be able to be included. But this would pretty much meet some of the, for lack of a better word, low-hanging fruit to bring Indian Falls to as completely accessible as we could possibly make it without major cost incurrence and put that to a maintenance stage very similar to River Ridge.
Question by Councillor Smith.
It's more of a comment. I just wanted to say that I'm very excited about this. Indian Falls is a real destination, and I've seen it over the years getting busier and more people enjoying it and bringing more people into our area. And very exciting that we can have an area of that park that is accessible to everyone. It's a beautiful spot, and if people have never visited, I really suggest you check it out because it is quite a destination.
And that's why it's listed as a destination park in our park standards, because you are quite correct. There's people from all over. It's just not locals that utilize that park. So the next project is a truck for tours for our department. Primarily what sparked this is 2 years ago, council made the decision to move from a visitor information concrete building to a visitor information services. And so with that, we go to where the people are, such as at events, hotels, wherever. Like we look for opportunities, and we have a pop-up tent with a number of things that we need to carry. The first year, we were lucky that we had a staff in the tourism department that had their own truck, so they used that for the summer. Last year, we utilized one of engineering's truck, which was fairly small and sometimes not suitable, especially when it rained, because that truck retained water in the truck bed. So, and we have a number of recreation programs, primarily throughout the year, but we increase that in the summer, where we transport canoes, and we have a lot of equipment that we do transport from location to location, because we don't just do programs in one site. We try to get around our municipality. And with our recent acquisition of 6 wheelchairs, sport wheelchairs, and the trailer, we are constantly having to figure out how we can get them to place. So from our perspective, our Recreation Parks and Tourism Department would benefit greatly from having a truck to be able to carry out the services that we deliver throughout the municipality. So the project funding would come from general operating reserves, and again, the strategic priority would be quality of life. And the same thing as Mr. Pace had said, we would be not predetermining whether gas, hybrid, or EV without an evaluation.
Councillor Brooks.
As a big part of this would be for, as you say, for the pop-up events, do you have some data on the interactions with people and the success of those pop-up events?
Yes, we do. I can add, I know that Ruth made the presentation last year, and I've asked her to do another presentation, just knowing that you guys have been busy with orientation and budget, but we can certainly provide you with that information. So this, okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder, and perhaps you've thought about it, but given that much of and maybe I stand to be corrected, but it sounds like much of the use of a truck would be during summer months. I just wonder thoughts around renting vehicles as opposed to having a truck that you use sporadically. It seems like a large investment for projects, activities that are more sporadic. I just wonder about that, the thinking behind that.
Yeah, definitely the increased use would be during the summer, but there definitely are times, I just know the other day that, Tissy had to rearrange her schedule, which we do quite often, to take the wheelchairs and the trailer to a location in the middle of the day, even though it was happening at night. And sometimes they're not available, and sometimes staff are using their own vehicles to make some of this happen. So there are definitely, the peak would be the summer, absolutely, but it could be used all year round. We wouldn't be opposed to having other departments utilize that in some of the downtimes as well.
Continue.
Okay, and so this, the annual contribution to trail groups is also reflected in our capital project, but you would have seen this in our annual operating because it's, we're using Canada Community Building Fund to fund a asset that's not owned by us, hence why it's reflected in the operating grant. So it would be moved from $584 a kilometer to 642 kilometers for this fiscal year, totaling that 82,300. So the next is Arts on the Trail and the Parks. This is an investment that council has been making for the last several years, and the amount has fluctuated. Last year, there was 30,000 allocated. Because we were short-staffed, there was not a project for Art on the Trail or in the parks. The last project that we did do through this program was the Pencil Walk, that if you haven't visited the LaHave Sunset Park, that was the last art installation. We are recommending for council's consideration the carryover of the 30,000 with an additional 10,000 for this year to boost that to 50,000. And we haven't made any determination of what park or trail. It could be a couple with this amount. We've also actually had a couple of artists already reach out to see if this was going to be continuing. Of course, I said it was contingent on budget. So the proposal is 50,000 to come from the Canada Community Building Fund.
Just, could you please correct, you said 10,000 more, but you actually mean 20,000.
20,000 more, sorry. If I said 10,000 more, you caught that slip. Yes, 30,000 from last year, so an additional 20 this year.
And Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about, how we, like who the stakeholders are, how we decide on art projects. Is it people who are approaching us? Are we going out and seeking out artists? And I think the larger question for me, which we've talked about before, is the opportunity to have an arts and culture policy. And I've looked at what some of our neighboring municipal units do, like Lunenburg. The town of Lunenburg has a public art policy, and the District of Chester has a the most recent thing I saw is that they're working on an arts and culture strategy, and I think that's through their actually their Department of Economic Development. And just in terms of things that we're parking or adding to that list, I would love to be able to talk about what the use of an arts and culture policy might be for the municipality and how we could begin thinking about how we leverage it for our strategic priorities, including economic development and including the quality of life. And when I look at other municipalities' arts and culture policies, they're actually quite inspiring, and I think they really set the bar high for making more use of the great artistic depth that we have in this municipality. So just saying, maybe we could add that to our list?
Councillor Brooks.
This is actually probably a question for the CAO. I understand that Modal is not allowed to, so for example, someone wants to vend ice cream at Miller Peace Park. We cannot give them money to do that. We're not allowed to do that. Artists are independent business people. So I'm wondering, how do we manage to direct tax dollars to a subjective thing? It's art to you, may not be art to me, may be art to someone else. How do we justify the subjective nature of spending tax dollars that all will have to see for something that's really subjective? And then how do we also, on a legal basis, sort of spin it in our heads that we're not giving money to an independent business when we do that?
So, thank you for the question and through the chair. So one of the broad-based areas where municipalities can spend money is for culture. So if it falls within culture, you can, not must, but you can fund it. And so that generally would be the highest level answer. And then the acquisition of public art, I believe, is an exemption from our procurement policy. So it can fall outside of the four corners of a defined tendering policy. Not that you must do that, but you can. And then I personally don't have a lot of knowledge about the Art on the Trail project. I did just take a quick look at the town of Lunenburg's policy and see how they've addressed it. But it isn't uncommon for municipalities to fund art installations through grants, either operating or capital. But I think I'll refer to the Director of Recreation to add to this.
I guess the only thing that I would add is we do go through a procurement process. We do issue a request for proposal. And I guess in my mind, it'd be no different than paying a company for a service that you're looking for, whether that's to build a pathway, that's the service, that's the product that you're looking for. So we do go through a procurement. We ask for requests for proposals. People, we assess those proposals based on criteria. If the amount is over $25,000 as per a procurement policy, it would come back to council for a final decision.
Mayor McLean-Wiles.
Thank you. I think Councillor Smith has raised, and she has raised it before. It struck me also from a conversation we had earlier, the concerns Councillor Brooks had about art in the trails. But it's brought me to thinking about the broader issue of public art installation, whether it be in a park or in some other location. And it ties in with the policy that Councillor Smith is asking us to look at. I think there is real value in us looking at having a policy and a discussion about this, and then deciding as a group whether we think this is something we should be, does this line up with the policy that we have? Because we have, throughout the municipality, we could identify a number of public places, other than our parks, where a piece of art, obviously completed by an artist from our community, some might view it as more appropriate than in a park. There are pieces of art in the park that I think are appropriate, but we have a lot of other public places that could benefit from and might have a broader appeal to our public if we thought about that. So I think these are issues that we park for now, if I may, while I'm not opposed to having it in the budget, but I think it needs to be in a conversation about our thinking around arts and culture in our community and what that might look like. So we're adding, I think what we'll do is add it, that list is getting lengthy. I think we're up over 10 or 12 items now, but that's good. I think that's really productive. That's part of the reason, we're here, is to identify things that need further discussion and evaluation. And I see this now from hearing from a couple of people on this, that there is room here for a much broader conversation.
Councillor DeLong, followed by Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, thank you. I would welcome a policy discussion on public art. I think that's a great idea. And I'll save most of my comments for that discussion, but I will just say my thoughts on public art are that there are many benefits to residents, including economic benefits such as increased tourism, improving quality of life, which we have as a strategic priority. Public art has been called community fingerprints. It gives residents something that they can really interact with. It is culture, it is heritage, it is all sorts of things that are beneficial to our community.
Where would the monies come if some or all of the art was vandalized? What department would that come out of? to then repair it, and what would the process be to then go out and rebuild that arc?
Right at this moment in time, since it's been primarily in our trails and our parks, it would fall within the Recreation Department, and I guess that would be a decision of council if it was completely vandalized, whether they wanted to replace it or not. I don't think it would be an automatic. Ultimately, you guys are the decision makers at the end of the day. That's, yeah, right now it would fall with us if there was damage. Unless, of course, it was something caused because of a defect that the artist, we do have that built into our contracts, which did happen with repainting some of the pencil walk that came from the artist because of the contract. There was no additional cost. So, those types of things you would build into a contract with the artist, just like you would any other service provider. But if it's vandalism, at the end of the day, it would be us making the decision with council's direction around whether we want to replace it or not. I have gotten Chester's, they did approve their policy. The rec director has already sent it to me, so I've already started to, because I know it was mentioned around the table, to compile some information around policies.
Okay, can continue, please?
Yes, so the next is land purchases, and it's open space, so we budget $50,000 each year. This is just in case an opportunity comes along to purchase land for future recreation purposes. Of course, if there was a cost of more than $50,000 to acquire, we do have our open space reserves that would be available. And sometimes that has happened. Firebrook Falls, in my memory, is one of those that we had the opportunity to purchase that from. It was identified in our open space strategic plan. It was privately owned, and the folks that owned it were deciding to sell, and we took that opportunity. So that's just an example. And that's just for future, and that's just as a placeholder. Saw Pit Wharf. So last year, we had extensive public consultation was undertaken, and we had feedback given through a number of means, through one-on-one meetings with stakeholders, to our public engagement session that was held in Lunenburg. We had a concept plan with an implementation plan developed by the firm with some Class D budgeting. So what is proposed for this year's budget is Phase 2, which is going from a concept plan to actual engineered designs that would form part of your tender document when you go out to actually start implementing and constructing the changes to Saw Pit Wharf. So it is estimated at about $200,000 to do the engineered plans, which would then lead into the implementation. This is reflected in the 5-year capital because I did have some Class D budgeting, so to include some cost over a 4-year timeframe. So this is proposed to come from general operating reserves, and again, quality of life. It also could be improved infrastructure as well.
Councillor Brooks?
When you gave us a tour of Saw Pit Park, it was noted that the boat ramp angle was built incorrectly. Mr. Pace mentioned in insurance on a project that we would see some money back because of the incorrect engineering. What's the status of that ramp? And is any of this $200,000 going to be going to correct that design flaw?
It would be. It was a marine engineer that designed that, and we accepted the design, so I wouldn't necessarily say that we would have any kind of recourse to go back, because that's the way they designed it, and that was the advice that we received from the marine engineer. So yes, we have asked to have that angle. I believe Matthew had indicated it was at 12%. I'm not the engineer, so it needs to be angled at 16, I think. So that would be reflected in the engineering designs.
Maybe just to follow up with Tom, is that anything we have any recourse over with that interaction with the developer of that ramp?
So under the Limitations of Actions Act, or thank you for the question, through the chair. Under the Limitations of Actions Act, it's 2 years for breach of contract and 6 years for negligence. So I'm not sure when it was installed or what the nature of the contract was, which would all have to be looked at. But if it was past 6 years, there's a statutory bar to proceeding to try to make a claim.
My memory is not that great, but I'd say it's more than 6 because that's when Brock was here, for those of you that remember. Yeah.
Councillor Vino?
Thank you. No surprise. Happy to see this on here. I just wanted to make a comment when we look at years 2, 3, and 4 and the spreading out of those allocation of funds. And having been around this table for 4 years, every year things can keep getting more expensive. And wondering if it makes more sense next year, again, putting it in your heads now, to tender out for the whole thing, get it done in one shot, as opposed to stages over the years as a cost savings. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, that would ultimately be a decision of council. When we asked the consultant to phase it in, that he did what he was directed to do, and that's hence how the budget is reflected at this point in time.
And do we think it'll take a year to go through this part of it, the engineer designs?
The engineering designs will take some time, and I suspect by the time we get them back, might be later in the fall, and so it's not really a good time to be developing. We do have a Saw Pit Wharf Advisory Committee, so they are asking that, it doesn't get developed in July and August.
Yeah,
We
of
look
course.
at those shoulder seasons of April, May, but again, it will all depend upon the tender and when folks can get it done.
Thank you.
Mayor McLean-Wild?
No, mine relates to the next item, so, yeah.
Okay, the next item is the pickleball courts. So as per the motion of council, funds for the development of the pickleball courts have been included in this budget. The intent is for the municipality to enter into a lease agreement with the South Shore Pickleball Club, who will secure and manage a contract with a company to develop the pickleball courts on property identified at the mark. The agreement is that MODL will pay all costs up front, with the amount to be paid back to be outlined in the lease agreement, and funds are to come from the pickleball court reserves. And the strategic priority is quality of life.
Mayor McLean-Wild, you did have a comment?
Yeah, no, it's actually about an item that we skipped over because we didn't have anything budgeted, and it's because we have Sherbrooke Lake listed as one of the items one of 4 items that we're going to consider looking at criteria for evaluating and next steps. And I just wonder, because we have reserves of 200,000 set aside, whether we shouldn't allocate some monies for that, thinking about an assessment of the road access and the access to that park, because I think that will become an important part of the decision-making, is the cost that might be facing us to actually have people access the park. And I wonder if we couldn't give thought to putting money in the budget to have that as part of our decision-making, or I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but because we already have money set aside, I wondered about that.
Again, that would be a direction of council. We certainly could have the assessment of the road. I guess I didn't necessarily include it in this year's budget because there was discussion around the table around that evaluation criteria and how you were going to make decisions on current parks or future parks. And there was discussion around, I think, particularly Pine Grove, Maliga Lake Boat Launch, and Sherbrooke as waiting for year 2. So that's simply why I didn't put anything specific. But if, with council's direction, if they wanted that included in the capital, we could certainly do that.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you. If we're going to open up a discussion about that, maybe we should look at taking the 200,000 and moving it to the Saw Pit Wharf development. I can't see us investing in a park in a different municipality on the opposite side of the lake. I think that if I'm going to be subject to thinking about investments in the recreation, I would be doing it in my own municipality, not a neighboring municipality, unless it was a centralized municipality like the town of Lunenburg or the town of Bridgewater. Mahone Bay, where we completely surround the municipality. But doing it on a fringe end in a different municipality, I have a problem with that. And it's probably a discussion that's long overdue. I myself would probably like to see us offer that property to the Chester municipality. Sell it to them, give them the $200,000 towards building a road. If they want to develop it, that's fine. But if they don't want to develop it, that sends a real clear message to me. I don't mind helping them out to build something, but I'm not necessarily interested in making a major investment for their behalf. Thank you.
Councillor Hubley?
Thank you, through you. I was going to wait till the end of the presentation, but it's been brought up, the future placeholders and Maliga Lake. So we're going to talk about that in the future. It's not just fallen off here.
What I understood, and perhaps I understood it incorrectly, is that this is a 5-year capital plan without really knowing the direction around Sherbrooke. We hadn't had the Pine Grove consultation yet. The 200,000 was sitting there for Sherbrooke Lake. I thought the discussion was that we wouldn't do anything particularly this year with Sherbrooke Lake, or the discussion, because council has to have the discussion around the Maliga boat launch as well. I mean, staff are spending time trying to locate properties that might be suitable around Maliga Lake, but that discussion would have to come back to the table. And the same with Pine Grove, although that is a park clearly developed and under the umbrella of MODL. But the discussion was, let's wait till the public consultation, let's wait until year 2. So I know there's no budget reflected there, but I think that the discussion hasn't happened around those 3 parks yet either. You'll see some in the 5-year capital plan where you'll see park accessibility upgrades or park standards. There's like some funding there that's kind of placeholders. There's no descriptions in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. That is where I was allowing room for discussion for some of these projects that aren't necessarily reflected currently or have a specific amount of dollars. So I was waiting to bring back that evaluation criteria, have that discussion with council, and then that would help inform year 2 of the budget and the ongoing 5-year capital plan.
That's perfect, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it didn't fall off radar.
Councillor Smith?
I've been back to that land on Sherbrooke Lake recently, and the roads are growing in. So I do think that it's a good suggestion to use some of that money to look at that road and to see if there should be some work done on it. Because even if we choose to sell it, we're letting the property, I would say it's devaluing because we're letting those roads grow in. And if we decide to do something with the property, then we haven't let it deteriorate further. I don't want to get into some of the points raised, but my residents would be very upset if we suddenly decided to take money out of reserves for Sherbrooke Lake and putting them towards another park before we had even assessed our plan moving forward. That money represents so many volunteer hours, so much community consultation, so much money put into the development of a plan. You know, I hear the suggestion that we take that money and move it somewhere else, and I think that's not a responsible decision. And I do support the idea that we look at the roads now rather than moving it further and further into the future.
Mayor McLean-Weil?
I'm sorry I brought it up. No, I genuinely thought it might be helpful to do that, but I'm going to withdraw that suggestion because I think the Sherbrooke Lake discussion will be will be an animated one that will generate a lot of conversation. We need a lot of time to do that, and we should, as we agreed before, we should get the criteria and then have the discussion. And we could always, I think, I stand to be corrected, decide that we could withdraw money from reserves outside of the budget process if we decide to do that. So please disregard what I said earlier. We will put it back in the queue for conversation later in the year.
Councillor DeLong.
Thank you. Without wishing to open any further cans of worms, I have a couple questions about other items that are out in future years or only as a placeholder. Is now a good time to ask them, or? This is your last slide? Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and the final slide is the e-bike. It's not a feasibility study. It should just say e-bikes. So that sorry, I didn't pick up on that. So we have 41,000 that was in the budget last year. This is really a carryover, and this is to purchase e-bikes and all of the other stuff that goes with having an e-bike. And we're looking at establishing a loan program to lend those out. We've developed some partnerships with the South Shore Library to help transport those bikes, so you could borrow them just like you do a book. And, working with the LCLC around storage and getting those out. So we have secured funding already of 31,000 from funding. So that's grant money that if we don't use it for this purpose, we would have to send it back. The RFQ was issued, and the deadline was yesterday, and we actually have six proposals that have come in, so it's a pretty competitive. We have our active living coordinator going through those proposals as we speak, so there'll be a report coming forth. So it's really a carryover. It's very long-winded to say that.
Councillor DeLong.
Thanks. Sorry for speaking out of turn. So the Mush vault toilet, that's not listed as anything for this year. Go ahead. Yeah.
So we went back and looked at the minutes. Tom showed them to me in black and white. That the discussion that's reflected in the minutes is that that council was wanting to have public consultation at Mush first, and taken direction from that special council meeting. I took the direction to have the public consultation. The priority was with our regional parks, and that is why Wiles Lake and the Mark is reflected in that public consultation for year 1, and why Mush is reflected in year 2 for those public consultations. And then I do have in year 3 the change rooms and the vault toilets, but that would obviously, a decision would be made, I would assume, from that public consultation process. So it wasn't lost in the budget, but delayed in the budget, and that was based on the discussion had at council with that special council meeting.
If it's okay to ask another one, or if it's somebody else's turn.
If it's a really quick answer, do you think, or is it going to be lengthy? Because we do have other councillors who would like to speak.
I'll put my hand up again. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Vino?
I spoke of this when we talked about it previously, and I would like to see the Mush washrooms proceed as soon as possible. It's a high-traffic area. I'll let the councillor of the area speak to that, but the previous council did get this started, and I thought, I misspoke obviously to residents thinking that that was in place, and now it seems like we've put the brakes on that. So would like to see that bumped up, although I realize that may not be the consensus around the table, but I wanted to speak of that.
Councillor Burns?
Thank you. I too have a horse I wish to trade at this time. A lot of you would be aware of how well the Pine Grove consultation went the other night. actually, since the campaign, I have to say it's the number one issue that I've received feedback on with, I would say it's been equal to everything else combined. And a real marker for me was when I was in town for my other day job the other day and I was at the bank, that several people unrelated to each other stopped me and said that they had heard that the Pine Grove consultation went so well. And I think that a lot of us would recognize that being stopped in town and being told you're doing a good thing isn't a common thing that politicians experience. So for me, that really hammered it home. At some point here, I'd like to, I intend to come back with a number for everyone a little bit later on, but I'd like to see just a small amount, relatively small and reasonable amount in the capital budget this year as sort of a contingency. We don't know what's going to come back. We have a report that's going to come back later this spring with what we've heard. It's very reasonable that it comes back later in the spring because we have a lot of staff time going forward on budget and stuff over the next couple of weeks. So later in the spring is when it will come back. But I would hate to lose the momentum if there is a couple of low-hanging fruits that we could do to respond to this really heartening amount of community engagement on this issue. And I would say that the reason I'm asking for it here is I wouldn't want it to eat up council contingency, which is, this is more of a local issue than some of the larger issues we will face as a municipality that we will probably use that council contingency for. And as well, we're already looking at shortening it, so I don't want to dip my hands in that bucket. I would rather just say, here's something that we have sort of set aside in our budget. We don't know what it's going to be used for, but we want to make sure that there's a bucket that we can respond to folks' needs in the capital budget. So on Thursday, I'll enumerate a number on that a little bit more for folks, but I just wanted to plug it, why I'm asking for it and why I'm asking for it in that way. It's just we've had such a positive response from this that to then not do anything with that for 8 or 9 months will lose a lot of momentum and energy that I think folks were really excited to be a part of.
Councillor Balfour, then by Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. Well, we're getting to the end of the slides for recreation, so I wanted to mention this. I'm not interested in doing any horse trades, which has a good concept. I just think that there's something that was left out, and I'm not looking for any major 50,000, and I'm not asking to be taken from anyone else. The LaHave Sunset Park needs the removal of a few over-mature trees. These are trees that are barkless, now decaying, home to woodpeckers, and I view this as a safety issue. Last year, as you're aware, 3 of them blew over. At the time, nobody was in the park. And those tree trunks have been slightly moved, but are still there. It might be a good thing to leave on the bank. The ones that concern me are those that are still standing and I think pose a danger. If those could be assessed and maybe some amount of funding for that, I have no idea of arborist costs. The other thing that I'm interested in is about $4,500 to replace maybe 6 of the trees with the $750 seedlings. That means they're not this high, they're as high as I am, because it seems like all the trees are mature and they're all dying at the same time. And if we wait, then we would maybe just have a grassed area out there. It would be much harder to grow trees then, because where it's extended into the river, high winds will break off any trees that we plant if we wait and do it all at the same time. So I'm not asking for 50 grand or anything like that. I'm asking for a small amount that's probably less than 10,000, but up to your discretion once you look at the safety issue of it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that would suggestion would probably better fit our operating budget. So I know that has to come back, so we can take a look at perhaps including a figure for council's consideration to try to address the trees that you've brought up.
Go ahead, Councillor Brooks.
This is just jumping back to the washrooms at Mush Mush. When we were first presented with this and we looked at some of the numbers, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first estimated number was 300,000 and we were told it had gone up above that. I asked, I believe Marta at the time, had there been any investigation into local solutions such as Jodrie's or another person who could manufacture a Rick Hansen certified portable accessible washroom, which would sit there for the 6 months that we actually use our outdoors, and then it could be taken away. And with the cost that I did in my own casual research, we could put one of those in every single one of our parks for less than one at Mush. Did anyone do any of that in research?
We have, no, Marta was seconded, and we have not done that research. The porta potties has the wheelchair stamp. It does not meet the Rick Hansen standards, although they're allowed to have the wheelchair symbol. I would have to reach out to several manufacturers. I don't even know if they manufacture a porta potty that would actually meet those standards of today. So that would be like a whole new business development.
And potentially a business opportunity for those people. I mean, like you make one that's not Rick Hansen certified, you make one that's Rick Hansen certified, all of a sudden it's an opportunity for a business in our community to be the person who wins the tender and gives the constituents a cost saving. So I would implore us to look into that. It seems really silly to not.
Well,
And if I can
Trudy,
just follow up
our
with that.
CAO would
Sure.
like to comment on that, if
Okay.
you don't mind.
I was just going to say, we do currently have vault toilets, so it's not like we don't have toilets at Mush. I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to clarify that we understood the direction given from council on January 23rd was to hold on, don't proceed with the vault toilets at Mush or Mush until after we have done public engagement. And because of the level of public engagement that we had planned for cluster development, MODL 2040, the capital budget has Walls Lake, it has the Mark reimagining. We didn't think that we would be able to do meaningful public engagement at Mush this fiscal, so that's why we put it off next year. I did have note to look into the possibility of portable toilets that are large enough to accommodate a wheelchair, whether or not they have the proper accessibility tag on them, just to see what that would be. But all of that work was put on hold after the direction given on January 23rd. So if we misunderstood that direction, now would be a good time to correct it for us. And so that's a comment for Councillor Brooks and Councillor Burns. When the Pine Grove Play Association dissolved, they transferred to us $10,625, which we currently hold in trust for the Pine Grove Park. So there is money in a reserve that has already been earmarked for future council-approved work on that park, so that information may assist you in not necessarily having to trade your horse, but maybe come up with a different plan. Thank you.
Mayor McLean-Weil?
Yeah, just on the Mush and Mush washroom issue, my understanding is very much in line with our CAOs in that we wanted to have, and there was a lot of discussion around the importance of planning and having consultation, having a plan, and then executing on the plan over time. And whether we do it, and for the reasons that have been outlined, it may not be reasonable to do it this year. And I think the planning piece is important, but the public consultation to go with it. Because it's one thing to invest a significant amount of money in an accessible washroom, but we want to make sure it's in the right place and that we've got our priorities right there. So I think the consultation and planning, and I'm going to continue to remind us all, as I just went back on myself, because we said earlier on that this was one of the things that we wanted to be sure we had right, and we needed a plan to do that, and we needed to involve public consultation in that. So I'm okay with it the way we have it set out.
Councillor Smith?
I just wanted the chance to speak up as the counselor for the area, and I appreciate everything that's been raised so far, and definitely in our conversation, I agree that we came to the point that we need a plan for that park. But we also recognize that money had already been put aside the previous year and not spent, which I understand was, I understand what happened there. We didn't agree to move the plan off to the next year. So that's my sticking point. I feel we should be doing that consultation this year. I understand all the pressures on staff, but I feel like I wouldn't be representing my area well if I didn't say that. That had already been planned. The washroom upgrade had already been planned, and we've kind of shelved that. So we owe it to this area to move forward as quickly as possible with the consultation that will result in the plan and the washroom. That's my 2 cents, yes.
Councillor DeLong?
I think, given the discussion we've just had, my question is already answered, but it's a similar question about the accessible playground at the Mark. There's a placeholder item in here that says it will be determined after reimagining of the Mark. Do we need any earmarked budget dollars for it at this point, or is that going to be determined through consultation and so forth?
That would be determined through consultation. I think that we do have a figure that's not in the 5-year capital plan, like future years, and quite frankly, that we don't really know until the consultation and what that concept plan looks like and what the Class D budget. In our park standards document, it says we are to have at least one fully accessible playground. We do have we have 3 regional parks. We have Wiles Lake, we have the Mark, and we have River Ridge. So I don't want to make any predeterminations. I know there was discussion when the playground was put at the Mark that we maybe look at an accessible playground somewhere else at the Mark or somewhere on the Mark property. But again, that's the direction of council, and that's why I haven't put a specific amount, because it would be in the overall envelope, I would think, of the concept plan when they're tasked to break out estimated costs for the various features that we might be looking at.
Certainly.
So do you have a timeline for that, like when we can expect to get the consultation finished, when we might be looking at putting out an RFP for the playground?
So it wouldn't be for the playground. The RFP that we would be putting out would be for the public consultation and the concept plan for both Wiles, assuming council approves this in the capital budget. Like, we won't do anything unless I get pre-budget approval for something. April the 8th, I think, is the big date for the budget. So once I know what's in my capital plan, I'd be looking at developing an RFP, which I have other templates that I use for Sawpit, of issuing that RFP for those 2 parks. And looking at getting that done sooner rather than later, so that you would have a concept plan with an implementation plan and Class D estimates of what it could cost to develop both of those parks to a higher standard. And of course, council will ultimately have to make the decision of what features they may or may not want, depending on cost. Yeah.
Seeing no further questions, or comments, is there more? 2 slides, okay.
If it pleases the chair, I can
Sure,
I can
sure,
read
I
it
was
to the
just-
end,
yeah,
so you
yeah,
might look.
yeah.
So I'll go quite quick. So this is just your 5-year capital plan summary. It's the totals that are sitting in your agenda package, which we feel does meet your strategic priorities. So we won't talk about that anymore. And so the next steps, as we've been speaking about this for these last few hours now, about how to make a council may direct staff to make adjustments, including adding projects to the list, removing projects from the list, deferring projects, and you could also direct staff to provide further information on the projects presented. And I think we have quite a list of that now, so we'll certainly continue to do that, and that's the end of this presentation.
So before we break for lunch, we do have two members of the public that have been sitting here patiently listening to the whole budget, and I'm not sure if you were planning to give some public input, either of you? Yeah. And then the floor is opened. If, please come to the podium, state your name and the community you're from. And if there are things that you would like us to address in an email to you, please add your email address to the paper on the.
Thank you. I'm fine. My name is Hal West. I live at 124 Cornwallis in Lunenburg. Don't hold that against me. I'm also a taxpayer in MODL. I just want to speak on Sawpit Wharf, actually. There are many places to spend your tax dollars throughout the county, and each and every one of these are important to your citizens of MLDL. I'd like to bring your attention to Sawpit Wharf, as this is important to me and to many others. This is a wonderful place for residents and visitors alike who wish to spend time in the outdoors, for recreation, or just to sit and enjoy the views of the water. Even though MODL has many views and places along the shore, Sawpit is the only, I think I'm correct, public park in MODL that has a public boat launch, which can give access to the ocean. I may need to be corrected on that. The plan that is here before you will address many issues the park has. As it stands now, weekdays are busy, but on summer weekends, the park is used by so many, it's difficult to find safe parking. The new plan will address this. The park is not totally accessible to all, and the new plan will also address that. The green area by the water is nice to sit and enjoy the coming and goings. This plan will allow for more seating and allow it to be accessible to all with better picnic areas, washroom facilities, and shelter from the sun and rain. Many seniors' homes bus their residents to the park so they can enjoy the views, and I'm sure the park brings back memories to the seniors as many made their living on the water. The new plan also addresses many safety issues, which includes access to the park and to exit the park. Sawpit Wharf Park is a wonderful place, but it's a diamond in the rough. It will take funds to implement the plan for the park. Hopefully, with funding assistance from other levels of government, this can be accomplished. In order to see Sawpit be what it can be, it's up to this council to make it happen. You are the only ones who can get this started and enable other levels of government to assist you. As I stated, it's a diamond in the rough, but I ask that you take the first cut to make this park a true gem for MODL. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Before we break for lunch, is there any other council direction to staff than what we've already given? No? We're going to break for lunch until quarter to 1. Yeah. Quarter to 2? Oh, it's almost 1 o'clock now. Yeah, quarter to 2, sorry. 1:45. Thank you. Well, I wanted to make sure they could hear in the other room, so they could come out. So we're back in session. We are going to be going in camera.
No.
Oh, no, right, we have Allison's added agenda item. Sorry, Counselor Smith. Would you like to speak to that further?
Yes, and I'll just start by perhaps reading the motion that I'd like to put on the floor, and then I'll speak to it. Could I do
Put
that?
the motion on the floor, someone can second it, and then you can speak to it and have a discussion if you'd like.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is that in light of the 8th femicide in our province since October, and the second in Lunenburg County since the new year, the Finance Committee recommend that Municipal Council send a letter to the province to support calls from the gender-based violence sector for epidemic-level investment and support.
Seconded by Counselor DeLong. Would you like to comment on it before we open it up for discussion?
Sure. We had the presentation from Be the Peace a couple weeks ago, and I was really heartened by the response from our table, that I feel we're all motivated to do what we can at the municipal level to address gender-based violence. And one of the things that Be the Peace has asked us for is to advocate for their organizations and the work they do at the provincial and federal levels. And I think this is an opportunity right now. That's not a great word, opportunity, but this is one of those moments when I think when Be the Peace was here, they said that there's 1 to 2 femicides a year in the province, usually. The fact that there's been 8 since we were elected and 2 just in our county, it's pretty devastating. And the Mass Casualty Commission, as Be the Peace talked about it, really zeroed in on this contributing factor of gender-based violence. And one of their recommendations, recommendation 5.13 in the final report of the Mass Casualty Commission, is epidemic-level funding for gender-based violence prevention and interventions. And even before this most recent death, organizations from the sector, survivors, advocates, were protesting the fact that the provincial budget did not contain a significant increase in funding to the organizations that address gender-based violence. And that's after they had, in the fall, declared intimate partner violence an epidemic in the province, which was a major step, but we all know it's empty without action. So I realized that we are looking at what we can do out of that presentation in our own work in the council, but I do want to say part of our work is advocating for action at other levels of government. So that's why I put forward this motion. I think it's a very good time to amplify the calls of these organizations and advocates and survivors who really need us all to step up and amplify their voices.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions or further discussion? Councillor DeLong.
I can't say it any better than that. I echo everything that Councillor Smith has said, and I am grateful that she has brought this motion to the table.
Seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor of this motion going to council to write a letter and to ask for extra funding, please signify by the raise of your hand. Thank you. The motion has passed. Thank you very much. We're now going to go in camera for two of our items. Could I have someone please move that we go in camera? Moved by Councillor Hubley, seconded by Councillor Vino. All those in favor? Motion's passed, and we are in camera. Oh, not quite yet, but we will be.